Arjun, you've made some good calls. I think last time we got together before Chrissy, we spoke about this, but you've made some good calls. The nerds there at InvestorKit, which are behind the Property Nerds podcast, for some reason are working out the right places to invest. Why do you reckon you get it so right?
I feel like there's a few things, right? Firstly, I got to give a big shout out to the team behind the scenes. Whilst I can take some credit, it's definitely not all the credit. So very much in terms of how our research division's broken up, we've got myself as the head of research, Anas as our data scientist, Jung is our research analyst, and Larissa recently is our junior research analyst. So in that research division, a lot of chart spreadsheets. That's the starting point. But to take it one step further, Phil, it's bringing out the source of truth and going on the ground. So when you combine a macro understanding with data points that are the end result of those drivers, and then end up actually looking on the ground at many parts of the country to say, hey, this is starting to play out, or that article that was out there isn't true based on this, it just gives a lot more confidence rather than just sitting behind a screen all day.
And you like doing it as well.
Yeah, that definitely helps, right? So I think
is that what you do on a Saturday afternoon when everyone else they go, I know you like your basketball, but you sit and go, I'll just go and look at some spreadsheets.
Yeah, and that's a normal day and that's a normal weekend, but not for many.
Yeah, and there's been some data come out recently, and I think it's validated a lot of your calls a year or so ago. I think realestate.com sent out some stuff recently, and a lot of the areas that you identified and started buying in some time ago performed pretty well over 2022. Can you tell me about some of them?
Yeah, so Real Estate Prop Track, also known as realestate.com.au, released some data on some of the top 10 performing SA4 areas. So for any technical jargon, essentially it's a big region, and that region can either be full of a couple of cities or at least a couple of councils. And so that is a statistical area that ABS uses for their measurement. Instead of just saying the city's name, they just make it harder for you and say, some other region that has that city within it. But long story short, they created a top 10 of performance. So this wasn't a prediction for 2022. This was January 23 looking back on the actuals of 2022. And firstly, I think many were surprised that that whole list was double-digit capital growth, which I think surprises many by the narrative of obviously rising interest rate, price declines, and low sentiment, which is definitely rampant in a few other cities. But that's the beauty of investing. You don't buy a house that represents all of Australia. You buy a house in a micro location that's part of Australia. And so I think that's the big part that we really applied in our logic. And when we broke down that top 10 list, 9 of the top 10 locations were locations that we had either actively made public calls on or are investing in for our clients even prior that booming period. So just to name a few, the Riverina region, places like Wagga, other regions, most of that region was dominated by sub-regions of Adelaide, which was another call I think you recall us making about it being the top performer for capital cities for 22 and to grow double digits, which it did. And then lastly, there were other micro regions like Bundaberg, Toowoomba, Hervey Bay, these sorts of surrounds. So I was feeling very, very excited to see that list once I saw it. And the outcome of it was definitely a massive change of wealth for many families, but also just gives us confidence, because when you have not 1 year, but going back to 2017, from Burnie, Tasmania to 2018, regional Victoria to 2019-20 Adelaide, and then picking out the recovery of places like Sydney. So these things just give us confidence to go, hey, we've really found the right solutions to help investors. Now it's just about, hey, how many more can we help and how many can we get to the end goal, not just a property market research goal, but an actual end goal of passive income. So that's very fulfilling when you hear that sort of stuff.